In the meantime, U.S. officials have temporarily closed a remote border crossing on the Arizona-Mexico border.
The unexpected closure of the Texas border by U.S. federal authorities surprised the nation, drawing attention to the increasingly tense situation on the country's southern border. This rapid and dramatic measure was not motivated by another rush of migrants, nor was it a direct response to political pressure. Instead, it began with a shocking and unexpected discovery hidden beneath the arid, sun-baked earth near a lesser-known portion of the Rio Grande. Border Patrol officials were conducting a routine search of an area notorious for smuggling activity when they discovered what seemed to be a collapsed tunnel. What they discovered, however, sent shockwaves through all levels of U.S. Homeland Security. Before we begin, please hit the like and subscribe buttons for future updates. The underground structure wasn't merely a simple passageway dug through the dirt to transport people or contraband. It was a gigantic, convoluted network of tunnels, properly reinforced, ventilated, and electrically wired, that stretched for miles beneath the U.S.-Mexico border. The tunnel system, designed with a sophistication rarely seen outside of military facilities, served more than just as a smuggling route. It appeared to be a carefully planned installation with various chambers, surveillance systems, and signs of long-term occupation. Authorities promptly shut off the area and scrambled to determine the scope and significance of what they had discovered. The tunnel network was investigated by experts from the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Army Corps of Engineers. Their discoveries simply served to heighten the alarm. Some of the tunnel chambers were outfitted with cutting-edge computer technology, satellite communication tools, and encrypted networks. Others contained operational markings, papers, maps, and coded symbols, indicating years of planning and collaboration. Even more concerning, preliminary evaluations indicated that this underground facility had likely gone undiscovered for over a decade, working discreetly beneath the surface, while border security efforts were predominantly focused on surface-level threats. The decision to completely shut down the border was not taken lightly. It came when intelligence revealed that the network was not being used solely for narcotics or human trafficking. There were clear indicators of paramilitary activity, including military-style gear, weapons depots, and encrypted communication logs indicating cooperation between domestic and foreign operations. The situation had progressed from a border control issue to a full-fledged national security crisis. Federal agents began closing down not only the immediate finding location, but also a large radius around it, suspecting that further tunnel openings had yet to be discovered. Military personnel were deployed to guard the perimeter, while drones searched the skies for any strange activity. News of the shutdown circulated quickly, although officials remained tight-lipped about the actual reasons in the early hours. Commercial border crossings were frozen, and traffic on highways leading to Texas's principal ports of entry came to a halt. Residents in adjacent communities like Eagle Pass and Del Rio reported seeing armored vehicles and helicopters in the sky, adding to the confusion and anxiety for local communities used to the hostile climate along the border. This occurrence felt qualitatively different, heavier, and more serious. Rumors circulated ranging from terrorist plots to the finding of nuclear materials. Though none of these were officially confirmed, the scope and secrecy of the operation fueled conjecture across the country. Experts evaluated the tunnel's construction processes and determined that this was not the work of a normal cartel operation. The precision engineering, noise dampening, and soil reinforcing techniques employed implied outside assistance, potentially state-sponsored. Investigators concentrated on determining who possessed the technical skills and resources to carry out such a daring building project unnoticed for so long. The possibility that a foreign force was involved in the construction of this underground base increased the urgency of the federal response. Intelligence agencies went through satellite archives to determine when the tunneling began and followed procurement trails for the specialist materials discovered on site. One particularly alarming discovery was biometric scanning logs implanted at one of the tunnel's checkpoints. The network appeared to be tracking movements inside using facial recognition software. This prompted two urgent concerns: who had been passing through the tunnels, and what information had they gathered? The availability of digital data demonstrated a level of planning and foresight that much exceeded what border officials had previously seen. Cybersecurity professionals were sent in to decode hard disks and servers discovered in some of the chambers, but their findings just added to the mystery. Cryptic logs reference infiltration operations, asset drops, and coordination nodes, all with dates going back more than a decade. Back in Washington, national security advisors rushed to examine the broader ramifications. If such a network exists under Texas, could similar structures be found beneath Arizona, New Mexico, or California. Had any sleeper operatives used this network to sneak enter the country? The president was briefed in a secure meeting, and a temporary state of emergency was issued for the affected area. Homeland Security raised the national threat level and began covertly communicating with partners to see whether comparable tunnel networks had been uncovered elsewhere. The concept that a covert operation of this magnitude might have slipped past the surveillance infrastructure of the world's most technologically advanced nation sparked deep reflection inside the intelligence community. The economic and social consequences of the border shutdown began to manifest almost immediately. Trade routes were disrupted, slowing the flow of commodities and putting enormous strain on supply chains. Thousands of daily commuters between Mexico and the United States were stranded. Businesses on both sides of the border closed, and a growing sense of anxiety grew. Farmers in southern Texas, already struggling with drought and labor shortages, found themselves unable to transport produce. Truckers lined up for miles, unsure when or if they would be able to transport their product. Border communities that relied largely on binational commerce experienced panic buying and economic standstill. Legislators sought answers. Congressional hearings were quickly scheduled, with key intelligence and defense officials summoned to provide clarification. Partisan tensions erupted, with some accusing the present administration of incompetence and others pointing to decades-long faults in border policies. Politics, on the other hand, was less important to the public than the unsettling truth that a large secret infrastructure had been functioning beneath their feet for years, potentially undetected. It was disheartening to realize that, despite billions of dollars spent on border fortifications, surveillance drones, and patrol teams, a major security breach had occurred below ground. The human element of the discovery provided an additional dimension of intricacy. Evidence discovered within the tunnel system suggested that dozens, probably hundreds, of people had been through, many of whom left personal goods behind. Bedding, tinned food, temporary kitchens, and basic medical stations indicated long-term settlement. Were these workers coerced into labor by more stronger forces, or were they complicit in something considerably more sinister? A separate compartment, evidently designed for interrogation or detention, suggested internal power struggles or enforcement mechanisms inside the network. The presence of such a space suggested an authoritarian order of operation, rather than a transit tunnel for unlawful crossings. The closure and ongoing inquiry compelled a reconsideration of U.S. border policy, not only in terms of security, but also in how intelligence and infrastructure are employed to avoid subversive threats. Experts advocated for the employment of subterranean scanning technology, satellite geospatial analytics, and advanced AI pattern recognition to discover underground anomalies. While several of these methods existed in military situations, they were rarely used for domestic border protection due to cost and political constraints. That hesitation now seemed dangerously out of date. Public panic grew as media outlets reported on links between the tunnel network and missing persons cases, smuggling rings, and even foreign spy operations. Though many of the reports remained unverified, the developing picture was one of a meticulously planned multi-layered operation that blurred the distinction between organized crime and clandestine warfare. The federal authorities' silence, while reasonable given the sensitive nature of the results, did little to alleviate rising concern. People began to wonder how far this stretched, how many people were engaged, how long it had been going on, and most frighteningly, what had already passed through. As engineers continued to survey the whole length of the tunnels, they discovered side shafts splitting off in all directions, some abruptly ending, and others reaching further into the American interior. One tunnel appeared to be headed toward a power substation, prompting concerns about possible sabotage activities. Another pointed to a minor airport. Each new discovery heightened the sense of vulnerability. The meticulousness of the arrangement, the directionality of the branches, and the infrastructure's stability all implied long-term intentions, possibly coordinated actions that had yet to be carried out. Analysts were left guessing whether this tunnel system was intended as a staging area, an escape route, or something else entirely. In Texas, the mood changed from curiosity to paranoia. Locals began reporting strange noises underneath, sightings of unknown people in remote regions, and strange vibrations near rural dwellings. Even though many of them were false alarms, officials did not take anything lightly. Law enforcement began to collaborate closely with utility companies, scrutinizing ground-penetrating radar data from construction sites for evidence of similar anomalies. Many Texans' sense of security, even in the face of growing border tensions, had vanished, replaced with a nagging concern that something considerably more organized and terrible was lurking in the shadows. Nationally, political ramifications began to emerge. Debates concerning border fences now involve discussions about what lies beneath them. Funding bills that were previously focused on aerial surveillance now seek large investments in subsurface detection devices and seismic monitoring. Border security, a long-standing source of contention in American politics, had reached a new, darker phase, marked by concealed threats and subterranean infrastructure, rather than optics and public demonstrations. Policy experts began urging for transnational collaboration with Mexico, not merely to combat cross-border crime, but also to perform joint inspections and underground surveys. The Texas border shutdown was more than just a temporary security precaution. It marked a significant shift in how Americans perceived national boundaries. The border has always been a line in the sand, both physically and metaphorically. It became evident that the real conflicts might be taking place well beneath it, away from cameras, beyond fences, and beyond the reach of any conventional defense frameworks. It questioned long-held ideas about sovereignty, surveillance, and safety. While border communities dealt with the practical consequences of the closure, the rest of the country was left to wonder how such a major operation went undiscovered for so long. Even after weeks of inquiry, officials hesitated to pronounce the tunnel network fully mapped and neutralized. The border remained closed, with just a few strictly monitored crossings permitted for critical trade and personnel. Construction crews worked in secret, pouring concrete into existing shafts while looking for new ones. The sheer scale of the operation meant that final closure could take months, if not longer. All the meantime, the psychological damage grew. Americans were not accustomed to being outmaneuvered on their own soil. In an era dominated by cyber threats and drone warfare, the return to a more tactile, palpable type of espionage struck a primal chord. This was not a remote data breach or threat. It was a physical invasion that occurred just beneath the nation's feet. The discovery of the border tunnel and the extraordinary response that followed recast the security conversation in stark, disturbing terms. Not everything harmful wears a uniform or communicates in coded language online. Some threats are silent, nasty, and etched into the ground. With the Texas border closed, the United States was obliged to deal with a new kind of frontier. One is drawn to the dark, silent passages beneath them, rather than geography or barriers. As federal investigators dug deeper into the tunnel complex beneath the Texas border, the scope of what they discovered became increasingly unsettling. The infrastructure, which was initially supposed to have a localized function, began to exhibit signs of a large, multi-tiered enterprise that stretched beyond state lines and possibly into other parts of the country. Seismic scans and magnetic resonance imaging were used to reveal dozens of smaller offshoots, interconnected caverns, and bypass systems, some of which penetrated beneath public infrastructure like highways, utility lines, and government buildings. The developing data revealed a subsurface ecosystem, a clandestine architecture built to maintain life and logistical operations for extended periods of time, rather than just a tube system. Water lines had been discreetly tapped. Power was being taken from municipal systems via jury-rigged transformers artfully camouflaged within abandoned industrial zones. Cell signals were routed through custom-built antennae, allowing for safe underground connection that was not detectable from the surface. Every technological fingerprint indicated that this was not an unplanned or reactionary build. This was long-term, calculated, and methodical. Federal agencies began developing psychological profiles of the persons or groups capable of orchestrating such a complicated subterranean network. The once dominant hypothesis of cartel involvement began to erode in favor of a more unsettling possibility: a hybrid operation. Intelligence indicated a convergence of motives and participants, with multinational criminal syndicates, extremist groups, and possibly rogue private military contractors pooling resources and goals. Some observers referred to it as a shadow coalition, a clandestine collaboration that has been operating beneath the surface for years, exploiting each group's expertise, including cartel logistics, building turncoat infrastructure, and paramilitary veteran strategies. Amidst this labyrinth of supposition, one unquestionable reality emerged. This network had existed beyond the scope of monitoring. It was invisible to drones, ineffective against barriers, and impervious to patrol routes. This type of threat did not involve marching, shouting, or firing. It crawled, tunneled, and listened. Whole corridors of the subsurface system were acoustically insulated, making sound detection from above practically impossible. Ventilation shafts were placed in seemingly random sections of deserted land, camouflaged as natural erosion or drainage discharge. The architects had created not only a tunnel, but an entire shadow realm beneath the nation's fortifications. As experts cataloged the discoveries from the tunnels, forensic teams focused on one room in particular. It was embellished with hundreds of maps, topographic representations, city designs, power grid schematics, and even water main layouts of cities across southern Texas, all of which were color-coded and accompanied by strange shorthand legends. When encrypted, the annotations revealed that detailed surveillance had been carried out on a variety of U.S. locations, military bases, airports, technology centers, and water treatment plants. These weren't random targets. They were crucial infrastructure locations, choke points in civilian life, nodes in a digital and physical web that, if destroyed, had the potential to cripple entire regions. Even more distressing were the mock-ups, which were scaled actual copies of some U.S. sites that had been painstakingly reconstructed in dimly lighted underground chambers. These models looked to be used for rehearsals, implying that the tunnel's creators had practiced infiltration or sabotage scenarios. This marked a paradigm shift in terms of national security. Potential dangers could no longer be assessed only based on their access to weapons or finances. The enemy had become patient, systematic, and intimately versed with American vulnerabilities. Linguistic experts were called in to examine the seized documents and graffiti inscribed into the tunnel walls. There were multiple languages present, including Spanish, Russian, Arabic, Mandarin, and English. While some markings matched recognized cartel IDs, others showed cryptographic signatures used by specific foreign intelligence networks. For years, intelligence communities suspected that other countries had established proxy assets along the US-Mexico border. The tunnel discovery added terrifying plausibility to that theory. Instead of overt espionage or proxy battles abroad, a new battlefield had emerged, one beneath the feet of American civilians. As security lockdowns increased, so did operational expenditures. Billions of dollars were given within weeks to undertake emergency geotechnical assessments, recruit subterranean warfare consultants, and deploy mobile command centers. Departments of Homeland Security were reformed to concentrate subsurface surveillance and reaction. Universities were awarded emergency financing to develop AI-assisted ground-penetrating radar. In Washington, the shockwaves had already disrupted fiscal predictions and defense planning. It was no longer about defending a boundary. It involved completely redefining the concept of territory. Meanwhile, in towns near the original discovery site, concern grew into suspicion. Civilians began establishing community patrols, often in collaboration with local police departments, to look for evidence of unusual terrain activity. Urban legends spread overnight. Some people reported hearing mild mechanical sounds from beneath their homes late at night. Others reported seeing strange people watching them from wooded locations. To avoid widespread panic, the federal authorities maintained tight control over information. However, leaks were unavoidable. Grainy photographs of tunnel interiors, cryptic machinery, and sealed vaults circulated on social media, fueling conspiracy theories and fringe speculation. Underground warfare professionals, who were limited in number but suddenly in high demand, warned that if one tunnel system existed, there were probably more. Their rationale was founded on historical precedent. Empires, cartels, and insurgencies have historically preferred underground networks because they avoid surface-level protection and are difficult to eliminate without causing collateral damage. The United States had experienced similar challenges in wartime settings abroad, such as Vietnam's Q-Chi tunnels, Afghanistan's cave networks, and Mosul's insurgent-built pathways. However, such a system had never been identified in the United States, let alone on this size. The urge to understand the network's entire intent increased. While sabotage and trafficking were possible motivations, digital forensics revealed an unnerving prospect. Agents retrieved fragmented files from one tunnel's secure server room, indicating chemical storage tests. Evidence of tightly enclosed and atmospherically isolated testing chambers suggested to biological or chemical trials. No active ingredients were discovered, although residue testing indicated evidence of compounds utilized in the production of weaponized gases. This discovery triggered an immediate referral to international oversight. Teams from NATO, the UN, and allied intelligence agencies were covertly brought in to assess threat levels and advise on containment strategies. In scholarly and military circles, the term subterranean insurgency became popular, referring to threats that burrow rather than invade and rely on patience rather than violence. As psychological operations experts investigated the tunnel network, they discovered evidence of planned psychological manipulation incorporated in the construction itself. Some rooms were designed to confuse, with circular layouts, tilted lighting, and false signs. These traits may cause bewilderment, fright, or paralysis in any pursuer unfamiliar with the environment. It was a design weapon rather than an architectural one. Logistical review teams discovered yet another layer of complexity: the network supply chain. Hidden beneath fake floors were containers of high-end materials, fiber optics, encryption equipment, hardened steel panels, and sealed food packs with shelf lives of more than 10 years. Many bore the insignia of genuine U.S. suppliers, indicating that the commodities were either stolen, redirected, or purchased under fraudulent identities. Investigations began to follow procurement trails, looking for shell businesses and fake accounts that could have funded the construction endeavor. Financial forensics revealed a complex network of offshore bank accounts linked to front firms in the Caribbean, Eastern Europe, and Central Asia. Money laundering, it appeared, was merely another piece of the puzzle. As the shutdown entered its second month, the public debate began to alter. It wasn't just about border security or immigration policy anymore. Think tanks began publishing papers on non-traditional military architecture, and city planners were forced to confront difficult truths about their own infrastructural vulnerabilities. If Texas can support such a concealed network, what about New York's subway arteries or Los Angeles' aqueduct systems? What lay dormant beneath Chicago's massive sewer grid, or beneath the remote portions of I-10 that straddle deserts and nothingness? The psychological impact of the unknown became a nationwide epidemic. In a rare bipartisan move, Congress approved emergency legislation authorizing enormous cash to domestic subterranean defense efforts. Military bases have begun drilling for underground conflict scenarios. Municipal employees were educated to report soil irregularities and odd structural vibrations. Entire careers developed around the developing area of domestic geostrategic defense. The phrase, "what lies beneath," evolved from a rhetorical query to a rally cry. Schools implemented subsurface safety drills. Technology companies shifted to build speedier subsurface detection technologies. It became obvious that this was not a one-time threat. It ushered in a new era of unconventional warfare. The international responses differed. Some governments discreetly complimented the United States for detecting and isolating the threat. Others were more reluctant, concerned about what such disclosures would signify for their own vulnerabilities. Mexican officials, while cooperative, faced their own scrutiny. How had such a large scheme evaded their attention? The mutual embarrassment prompted increased cooperation, but also political strain. Mexico conducted its own internal investigation, and within weeks discovered smaller tunnels crisscrossing their northern territories, typically abandoned, but occasionally still in use. Meanwhile, further examination of the tunnel layout revealed terrifying perfection. Structural engineers stated that several of the passages were designed to withstand ordinary destruction. Their depth, curvature, and fortification meant that typical methods of destruction, such as explosives or water, were likely to fail or inflict substantial damage to neighboring surface structures. It wasn't only about discovering the tunnels anymore. It was about determining how to securely destroy them. Specialized subsurface robots units were deployed, complete with LIDAR mapping and remote demolition capability. However, progress was slow, and the actual breadth of the network remained unknown. The focus of the ongoing investigation shifted to the broader ramifications of how such a system could have gone undetected for so long. Counterintelligence analysts were among the expanding number of professionals engaged. Their mission was not just to uncover foreign involvement, but also to assess the likelihood of corrupted persons within U.S. institutions. Their findings, while not made public, hinted at an ugly truth: layers of bureaucratic slowness. Fragmented data sharing among agencies, along with jurisdictional ambiguities, may have provided an ideal setting for long-term concealment. The boundary was patrolled, but not beneath the ground. Surveillance systems were designed for drones rather than abnormalities that penetrate the earth. Worse, certain contractors and authorities involved in border building projects were found to have signed off on terrain irregularities that, in retrospect, appeared to be early symptoms of tunneling. Under high security, the excavation teams began finding environmental irregularities near the tunnel entrances. A pattern of artificially cooled earth layers was discovered just above major branching of the tunnel system, which was very remarkable. These cooling techniques, likely intended to reduce infrared detection by flying drones, necessitated a thorough grasp of both military surveillance and soil thermodynamics. It confirmed once further that this was not a haphazard operation by amateurs. It was designed with knowledge of how to defeat American surveillance systems. Certain tunnel extensions were also called into question because of their timing. Satellite photography over the last 10 years shows that development often increased during times of political upheaval or significant media diversion. For example, stages of the tunnel's development coincided with natural disasters, political scandals, and large-scale protests. These moments of national attention elsewhere have created opportunities for the network to flourish quietly underground, protected not by stealth technology, but by the simple human instinct to turn away when overwhelmed. As the data set grew, a new and alarming pattern appeared. Certain tunnels were perilously close to key groundwater sources, particularly elements of the Ogallala Aquifer system. These subterranean water networks supply drinking water and agricultural help to millions of people in the central United States. Any intentional or inadvertent poisoning of such water sources could have disastrous consequences. This revelation transformed the tunnel network from a national security threat to a probable environmental and public health disaster. Geological specialists cautioned that even modest meddling in some locations might undermine water tables or introduce chemical contaminants that would be difficult to detect in time. In response, emergency protocols were initiated in multiple counties, and environmental monitoring systems were placed on high alert. The EPA, Department of the Interior, and FEMA all became involved, making the Texas border crisis one of the most complex federal responses in modern history. At the same time, private sector contractors who specialize in ecological surveillance were hired to evaluate soil and water samples throughout a 300-mile span. This expanded breadth revealed how unprepared national infrastructure was for underground dangers, not only in terms of security, but also in terms of long-term ecological sabotage. Meanwhile, sociologists and criminologists became interested in the social psychology of such a covert activity. Who would volunteer to live underground for years? What ideological, financial, or psychological reason would lead dozens, if not hundreds, of people to engage in such a secretive and arduous lifestyle? Interviews with defectors from similar global organizations revealed a variety of motivators, including cult-like ideological indoctrination, financial desperation, extortion, and promises of eventual release through some higher cause. The tunnel's dormitory portions, which were both austere and meticulously organized, hinted at a structured hierarchy, a chain of command in which each individual had a specific duty, and discipline was strictly enforced. Nonetheless, despite the military-grade technology, creative construction, and frightening precision, some aspects of the network revealed human vulnerability. Some portions showed evidence of panic, such as abandoned equipment, unfinished routes, and messages penned with hurry. One concealed chamber, sealed off by a blast door, held a stockpile of oxygen tanks and emergency supplies, with expiration dates from years ago. This suggested contingency preparation for circumstances where escape to the surface was no longer an option. It portrayed a picture of ambition and terror, of planners who understood the dangers of exposure and had planned for full seclusion. The media, despite being constrained by government-imposed blackouts in certain areas, gradually began to press for greater transparency. Documentarians, independent journalists, and former intelligence officers launched their own investigations. The public wanted explanations not only about what had been discovered, but also why such threats had gone undetected for so long. Protests broke out in large cities, not over border security, but over perceived institutional blindness. The central question that persisted across every news cycle, editorial, and late-night monologue was eerily straightforward. How did this occur here? If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our channel. Also, please leave your views below and tell us what you think about the Texas border shutdown. What do you expect to happen next? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.